So
Perfect.
let me start by asking, what time is it for you right now?
Seven 7:30 a.m.
AM. Jesus. Okay. So I got you
Yes.
like first thing.
Yeah. You just got me at a good time. It's been a bit of a stressful week, hence not replying to messages. My apologies, but
That's I,
it's a bit better now. So yeah, I have the time and mental space now.
so okay. Well, let's and I'm assuming I always assume all creators like you are like every free minute you're thinking, well, here's a slider I'm not making, or here's a product that I'm not creating. So I don't want to take up a ton of your time. So I'll kind of keep this rolling through. Um, but just to sort of start, and I'm gonna ask this one because I'm new-ish to the scene, right? I just started with fidgets in December, so there's a lot of the stuff that I'm learning, and that's why
Okay.
I wanted to do these interviews because a lot of people tend to approach something, especially in the fidget community, as sort of seasoned veterans in it. And what I tried to start
Yeah.
out with is being kind of the voice of people who are just discovering this
Yeah.
really kind of crazy community of toys that we didn't know existed. So
Yeah.
for you, and I'll what is this your career? Is this your main vocation, or is there like a job that allows you to kind of build sliders and pens and beans and stuff on the side?
No, this is it.
This
This
is
is full time. We got a few staff, few employees, a couple of machinists. So the longest, shortest story is probably started 10 years ago. Started initially on Kickstarter, the
okay.
crowdfunding platform. For those who don't know, started with like a little titanium bottle opener and then a key holder, um, and then just always making new designs, tweezers, pens, pocket clips, carabiners, little containers. Just I think probably like 70 different products at this point. We obviously got on, and then at one point we got onto during all this time, I actually didn't do any machining. I did the finishing and the water jet cutting of the initial parts to then get machined.
Okay.
But I had a machinist I worked with,
How about the
and
design though? Were you the designer of the products?
always been the designer. Yeah, I've been pretty much the only designer and still am. Apart from the two AI design
We'll
sliders I
get to
did a
those.
few weeks ago.
We'll get
We'll get to
we'll
those.
start those.
And so we did like the fidget when the fidget spinner craze was on. Had quite a lot of success and did quite a few fidget spinners. They kind of that kind of
Trickle
thing
out. Yeah.
passed, and then I'm probably a little bit different in that I think my business might be a little bit larger than others. Like other people in the slider community, I get the impression I don't know much about them, but I get the impression they're sort of a one-man machine shop
Yeah.
and that kind of thing quite often from the garage. I don't know, but I get that impression. I don't really follow others too much. But we've got like an industrial workshop, machines, couple of staff, couple of machinists, should I say? And so my expenses are high, and so even though I think I sort of sharing here, even though people, my prices are probably relatively high for what we make, it's not like I'm making really any money or anything right now. Like we're still just building and growing the business, and every week is challenging. Hence the stressful week I mentioned earlier. It's still a challenge. But got into fidgets 2 years ago. Just fidget sliders. I came up with one that was called the Floop. I don't have it here, but it's like a ring that you sort of like just flip around.
Yep.
And I just came to Facebook with it. I hadn't used Facebook at all. Um, but apparently during the spinner craze, I was well known on there, but I'd never even logged in. It wasn't a thing. I was mainly on YouTube. But when I came with this Floop, people just started asking for sliders, fidget sliders, and so I started looking into that, and just kept developing and still developing even now. So it went from brass plates to zirconium plates, Teflon plates, screw-in plates from epoxy plates, and just constantly evolving. And it's in a pretty good place now. And I think that's pretty much the potted history of where I'm at.
As a designer, do you have any kind of a design background? Like, is there an education in design? Did you always just kind of find it cool and you like to do it, and then it just got into products?
No, it was pretty much. I used to sell ebooks online for a while, for a few years. Sort of just living that sort of laptop, work from your laptop
Mhm.
lifestyle. You obviously advertised online. I was kind of doing that because I was like, um, my son Julian, who's 13, almost 14. Um, I'm not together with his mother, but we get on well, and he's the whole reason I'm in New Zealand. I met her. She's from New Zealand, back in Scotland 14, 15 years ago, and I came over when Julian was like 3 months old, for a month, and then I went back to Scotland for a year. Came over when he was a year and 3 months old for a month, and what allowed me to do that was this online information marketing that I was doing, and then I eventually moved here when he was about 3.5 years old. But I had to get it to get here. I had to get a job, and I had to get like a job in IT, and I just hated it. I was always a working for myself kind of person. And while I was there, that's when I sort of started looking at a different business, which is how I found Kickstarter.
Okay.
Um, and so I hadn't. So the reason I'm saying that is that I hadn't had any design background at all. I just saw that I've always been interested in mechanical things and have a bit of that kind of bent to me. My grandfather was very, very good at that. My father's good. My grandfather was very, very good at that kind of thing, always making things and designing things. And so there was definitely something there. But no, I just sort of designed a bottle opener, designed a key holder. And so it's just sort of figuring it out over the years. I started sort of as designing okay and got quite a bit better. But if I compare myself to real designers, I'm shocking, something's working anyway. The fact that people keep buying, that's the way I look at it. If people keep buying and liking the designs, something must be going right. But there's no education or anything. Just sort of a little bit of skill initially, natural ability, and just building on that over 10 years. Because even though I've maybe designed, I don't know, dozens and dozens of sliders and 70 different products actually made it and got produced, I've designed hundreds and hundreds, and spent thousands of hours. So there's a bit of learning and improvement of skills there.
So I would think, or so I'm a 3D designer, motion graphics guy. So
Yeah.
when I see sliders and products being made, of course, my brain starts going off, and it's like, oh, that's cool. I could play with that and do that. And I would imagine, for me at least, that the designing phase would be the one that's easiest to get lost in. Like, are there points where, because if you sit down and you just start designing something, and I'm not sure of the, I'm assuming it's some type of CAD or some software that works with the CNC machines and the modelers and stuff. But it, do you ever run into a stage where you're designing and then you just kind of keep going and you can't self edit, and you get to a point where you're like, holy shit, this is ridiculous. Like, I've gone way too far, and either I can't make it or it's no longer practical.
Um, the short answer is no, but and I think that's probably just my stuff. If I have a theme, like a thing that's common across everything I've designed, whatever it's been, pens, carabiners, bottle openers, sliders, spinners, it's been that I'm always trying to strip away everything I can. And I think that probably means that I don't have that problem because I never try to add lines in or add features in. I'm always trying to strip away and strip away and strip away. And so things come to a point quite quickly in the design. Quite often I have to go back. So quite often I'm going backwards, but um, I always seem to have way more designs and concepts than I can ever sort of make. And so quite often a design is actually kind of fully formed in my head before I actually start going on to the physical software. We use Fusion 360, and that takes us from the CAD all the way through to talking to the machine. So that one bit of software, Autodesk Fusion 360, is pretty good.
Well, so when you're designing something like that, and you're coming up with a concept, how much of it is form over function? Like, how much do you, when you're making these sliders, are there, and I don't want to say checklists, because I checklist sounds very uncreative and unimaginative, but do you have
Yeah.
points you have to hit? So when you're designing a new slider, is it, well, I need to make something look cool and it's going to be great, or is there the challenge of, okay, how can I make the grip even better? Can I come up with something that ladders better, that, you know what I mean? Like, what are the
Yeah.
primary focuses and drives behind making a new fidget, other than people are going to love this, I'm going to come out with a new style?
I would say it's both, and it's kind of evolved over time. So initially, it was really, I was just focusing really on especially with the first slider, which was the
Oh,
Toad,
yeah.
and it was, yeah, it's weirdly enough that one's quite hard to beat, other than maybe the Toad X in terms of its, there's corners where you can rotate and ladder around. Like it was, I really focused on the grip and the functionality there. It turned out like it looks good as well. You can kind of make it look good as long as you get the function down. But a function is always first, like number one. But in saying that, recently, as I've gotten more well known in the slider market, and there's been more people asking for more things, the Facebook group's grown, the email list, people that have bought and show interest has grown, and sort of I can blog to them about it. There's a lot of people who, I think there's just so many variations in what people prefer. So the sun's coming through in the background there.
It
The
makes you look
I'm just
majestic
gonna
in
adjust.
filming.
I'm just gonna, yeah, yeah. Um, I think there's just so many different preferences. Like some people will, what to me is a reasonably grippy slider, will say there's not enough grip,
Right.
and other people where there's a slider where they just want a flat, smooth surface on top, and that's fine for them. And most people, including me, are like, I can't slide that. Like, and so, and some people, I only have say one type of magnet in the slider. I like the one strength, and I stick to that regardless of what people ask, because some people are just, they immediately take them out and put stronger magnets in. Other people immediately take them out and put weaker magnets in. And so there's a whole range. I mean, the main thing for me is like the functioning, so that the plates and, every slider gets tested as it goes out the door. Um, but yeah, initially it was mainly, I was focusing a lot more on the specific function. But I learned that people, there's so much range, and they're happy to have that, a certain look and a certain feel. Even if it's not that grippy, it works for some people. The market, as you'll know, seems to be very fluid. People are happy to buy a slider. It's not for them. They'll knock
Yeah.
$20 off and they'll sell it on. The market's a very liquid market, and they seem to. And so I think they'll just try sliders. They may not look grippy to them. They'll try it. It may work. It may not. They'll sell it on, and it's just a very fluid market in that regard. So I hope that answers your
Yeah,
question.
no, and it's funny. That's something you touched on that I've learned as somebody trying to start a channel, and obviously these channels are typically based on reviewing stuff, products. But I've found that
Yeah,
as a 50-year-old married man with two teenage kids who cost money every single day, um, you
yeah,
can't, or at least I can't, keep buying new things. And so part of that is why I do interviews, why I do more of the culture and the community of fidgets, so that I can kind of go, well, shit, I don't have anything to review today. I don't really have anything to talk about. I'm going to do this instead. Um,
yeah,
there is that. I was really surprised with that whole aspect of the fidget community, where whatever you buy, you can pretty much sell. Like there's no issue. I mean, I'm on the other end right now of I tried to get into knives for a little bit, and I bought one really nice, really high end, and I'm terrified to use it because it's too high end for me. I don't want to
yeah,
scratch, like it's stupid. It's a knife that I don't want to cut with because I don't want to ruin the blade. So now
yeah, yeah.
and it's the hardest thing to sell. Like I'm not getting any bites on it. And with
Ah,
sliders or
yeah,
fidgets or whatever, you post it, and within a couple of days, you're you're selling it. You're selling it back. So
yeah,
I,
yeah,
it's such an interesting um, it's such an interesting sort of business, where you're selling a product that, at least up until now, you can be reassured that the value of it won't drop much. And so, like you said, I wonder if that actually helps with sales and with sort of product loyalty and stuff, where people are buying from you all the time. And if they don't like it, a lot of times I'll see on posts or someone just goes, just got it, not for me. It's great, love it, but it's not my grip, or it's not whatever. So
yeah.
that actually, that has to be a bit of a bonus for you, I would think, that you can actually sort of sell stuff and create stuff, and you know the market is likely going to be there because it's not going to get burnt out the same way something else might.
Yeah, I think so. I hadn't really thought too much about it, but yeah, it's, and I don't really watch it too much. I mean, we've got our Facebook group, just the Magnus
Sure.
Fidgets, but there's also the Facebook group Magnus
Bye.
BST, Buy Sell Trade. I never even really look at that. I mean, it kind of looks after itself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of activity, loads of people selling and buying on there. But honestly, I never really look at that group. But I'm guessing it does. But yeah, it's tricky because what I call the previous business is essentially it's still this business, but when I sold pens and carabiners and everything before, I kind of went just full on 100%, pretty much 100% into sliders and fidgets. It was a different market, all different customers. I basically started again like 2 years ago, just from the ground with zero slider buyers, and so I built it up from there. But it's similar in that regard. Like I don't know if the market's, well, it's definitely not as fluid, but I still had lots of repeat customers. I look after them. Someone would buy, they'd receive other emails, blog posts, offers, videos, whatever from me, and I just sort of play the long game and just show them interesting things, offer them other products, and so this the slider market seems to be the same. Like I still have so many people. Like most of my sales are repeat customers. Um,
Yeah, the lot of
but I think you're right.
years.
Yeah, I think the fluidity, the liquidity of the market does help, but but then I think on the other side, I also wonder if it doesn't help because people can easily get a slider if they go into the group and get that
Right.
slider secondhand. Whereas if it wasn't so fluid, they'd have to come to me. So I think it's probably one
Yeah.
way and also the other way. So I think it's both good and they probably balance out.
One of the things that I was sort of surprised about is hearing, for one, whenever I'd see kind of your blog posts and stuff, I immediately got a sense that you were on a slightly different scale from some of the other makers that I know, only because, and not even the machine, but it was funny mentally. What I saw was that you had a street view window looking out onto the road. It seems to be on,
Oh
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
immediately I thought, oh shit, that's not in his house. Like this is in a building. This
mm,
is in a space, like a space somewhere. So
yeah,
the fact that you have, and I think this might sort of be surprising for people then to learn, is that your sliders typically max out at around 300 ish, right? Like if you're getting into
yeah. For the zirconium
yeah,
ones,
the
yeah,
zircons
quite
they
a bit
kind
there.
of go around
Yeah,
300. For the titanium ones, they're around like the 190 and up kind of thing. Well, that range
yeah,
is right in the same range as the other kind of, like you're one of the top three, right? Like there's always that
yeah,
top three levels. We talked
yeah.
about before, like we've got the Compiforms, we've got yours, and then we've got the wraps. So what's actually kind of shocking to me is after just hearing you say you've actually got staff and you've got a front end, like basically you have a place. So with all that overhead, you're still pricing your product at the same level as sort of the one man shops or the 2-person shops or whatever. So is that, I mean, I can only imagine, the pressure of having to put out volume if your margins aren't going to be as high if you have all these other sort of mouths to feed. So
Yeah.
and the fact that you don't see drops like every week, like, hey guys, here's a drop. There's 10 more, 10 more, 10 more. I mean, how do you maintain that? If sliders are, and I mean, I'm not saying, hey, tell me how much money you make, but just to say, like, there's got to be some pressure, some added pressure that goes along with that to keep the price down, but to have staff
Yeah, we're in a funny position. And I say we, I always just call the company we,
global.
even though it's kind of me
I
and a
say we
couple of shit. I
sometimes,
just the global.
literally me,
Yeah.
but I say we. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, in that we're in the awkward stage where, and we're kind of getting out of it where if it was just me and a machine for finishing, and I could be working from my, a garage. If I had a garage, I just rent a small house though, or rent a small apartment. Um, then your expenses are so low that you don't have to sell too many. And then you have the sort of the big jump where you've got a big business,
Mhm.
say, and you've got efficiency of like 6 machines or 8 machines, and you can have that scale and you can have those thinner margins. I'm in that sort of uh, not a sweet spot, but a sour spot. It's this
Yeah.
awkward little bit where we only have a couple of machines, but we have the machinists, we have insurance, we have rent,
The
we have
financing fees.
the loans for the
Yeah.
machines, yeah, the financing for the machines. And so we're just at that sort of, if I was working on my own, I'd be sort of making maybe good money if I was in a garage. But and if I was over here, I'd have a lot of a lot more machines and have efficiencies. And it's just this challenging point, which we are getting out of because we are getting another machine.
Right.
Because I mean, if we only had one machine initially, and then you've got the you got the staff, um, you got the rent, you got the insurance, you've got all that stuff, and it's got to be paid for by one machine. Whereas if you can just add one more machine, you've doubled your capacity without increasing hardly any of the costs. And so we're just at that awkward little thing. Like I want to get the prices of the sliders down. Like you said, we're in the hundred, just under 200 or thereabouts, depending if you get Teflon plates or not.
Yeah.
And then some of the 3-click ones are like 220, 250. Like I'd like to get everything under 200. I'd like to get them even lower. But I just have to work towards it. Like it's that kind of thing, really.
Well, and as a business owner, I'm a partner in an agency, and so I can completely relate to that. And this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, is that when you run your own business, you can start, like, business can go, but the minute you expand, your revenue takes a
Yeah,
huge dip, because now you have
yeah,
all these other things to pay for before you can go up again. So
yeah,
the fact that you've taken on this much responsibility, I guess we'll call it. I mean, it's not necessarily debt, but it's a thing. Like, a lot of people need to understand, like, why don't you get a new machine? Well, dude, there's financing. It's not like you're pulling that money out of your pocket and going like,
yeah,
hey, here's like $100,
yeah,
and no, like, there are payments. There are all these things that have to happen, and then you have to make enough product to kind of compensate for the extra payments of the equipment. So
yeah,
I mean, I applaud you doing that for what this is, because it's incredible to think that fidgets can pay for that, right? That fidgets can actually make your life. And like, I interviewed Gavin from Dynamic Inertia. Makes tops and stuff, and it's the same thing where
yeah,
this is his career, but he just makes them himself, and he gets up one day, and if he can make 3 or 4 a week, he's happy. Um,
yeah,
with you though, I can imagine, like, again, as someone who is responsible for other people, you can't just wake up and go, oh, what am I going to do today? It's like, oh no, I'm getting up to
yeah,
feed mouths
yeah,
today. Like, I've got other people that are relying on a paycheck and stuff. So that definitely
yeah,
changes the dynamic. I think it's important for other people to understand that too, especially when people are saying, hey, we want more. Where are the drops? Only 10. I didn't get mine. Why is there only 10? And it's like, well, there's a there's a lot that goes into those 10.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And well, the funny thing is, uh, the smaller makers, it seems a lot easier for them to do um, customizations
Yeah.
like there's a combination of two things. One is it's kind of what you're interested in as well. Like I'm really not interested in making like a one-off of something,
Right.
like doing it's just what I'm not interested in, and so I don't do it. And so that it's like the like because I'm the owner of the company and kind of everything originates with me without that sounding too egotistical. Everything filters through, and so I never make sliders like most other makers seem to leave the machining lines. Like if I grab obviously like this is quite scratched this toad, but like our finish is this satin sort of finish, and I try not to leave any machining lines or anything like that in the parts, just because that's my own personal preference. Whereas other makers, they leave machining lines in, and they don't. Some of them don't even tumble them or finish them, and that's what they're interested in. And yeah, I think it's sort of it comes through. Sorry, it 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 it's hard. It's hard to even small changes are hard. Like even to tweak something because you've got the machines running. They run a certain program to make a certain product. But to make a change to that product, you've got to kind of go back to the drawing board and you've
Right.
got to test it again. You can't just run it. And if we're doing larger numbers, we have to do a run of 4 or 8 sliders or something like that, maybe a little bit more. It's hard. We'd be out of business if we made a one-off of something, like a version of it. It's just where we are, unfortunately.
When you make a batch and there's a drop, what is the
Yeah.
limitation to that, and what is sort of the maximum capacity that you can output for a drop? Because this is sort of just to answer the people who, like might say like, oh, why don't you do more? Like I want one. How come I didn't get one?
Yeah.
What sort of, and I mean, you could make it like a very short form version of it, but the process in going into, say, making a batch for a drop, what are the
Yeah.
limitations to that?
Um, I could do one half of a slider and then another half. It wouldn't be worth it. What I've done is on the machines, I've invested a lot, and this is where the slider community is a bit different. In when I first was doing pens, carabiners, all the original products I did when I started 10 years ago, most people, they were interested in the sort of the behind the scenes and how it was made, and the quality of the pens and what the materials start, what it looks like to start with. And so when I first started in the sliders 2 years ago on Facebook, I started showing that stuff just as I had for the sort of
Right.
previous 8 years, 7, 8 years. But people really weren't that interested. A couple of people were like, "Oh, I want to see this," but everyone else, and the reason I know they weren't interested is there was no comments, there was no likes. You're like, "Oh, okay," so they're not really interested in all the behind the scenes and how it's made and how it starts. And so I don't really show any of that. That's what I'm interested in. I'd like to, but if no people are interested, then I won't show it. Not often anyway. And so to say that is so people probably don't know. I've invested a lot in getting the business systemized so that we can just do. We're very fluid. We don't have to do. Most machinists will make they'll make like a giant. I get this camera right, like a giant pallet of parts. They might make 30 parts. I mean, even if they're a smallish maker, just for the efficiency. But we typically will do one, two, three, 8 bodies. I've set it up so I can do 8 bodies, and you usually have, you do one side, you'll machine one side, and then you'll machine the other side. Sometimes there's a third operation on the machine, but usually you put the blank on, machine it, take it off, turn it around, clamp it, and machine it again. So we will do one, two, three, 8 bodies, which is 4 sliders, and that's actually a good number for us. We probably don't do, even though we've got two machinists,
Mhm.
and like we're still making pens. We're doing that just now, and we did the Magic Beans fidget for a while, and both those are lathe ones. That's not a CNC milling machine. That'll be a CNC turning lathe, for
Right.
cylindrical objects, and so that's separate to this.
Right. Just to finish up, so it's interesting. So you say if you do like a batch of four, right, like 4 sliders,
Yeah,
how long does that take
yeah.
to put out four?
This is where it's a little bit different as well. I've invested recently in. We have a couple of robots now, and so it used to be quite involved because we had to take the parts and then we had to sand both sides of them, the underside and the top side, to get the machining lines out. And we put them in what's called a centrifugal barrel tumbler, and we put it in for a couple of hours in one media and then another media, and that would get the finish. And then we had to like ultrasonic them, clean them by hand, each one, dry them, and we'd still get like a redo rate of like 20 to 25% because they'd scratch each other in the barrel. The parts would hit into each other. But what I've invested in over the last, probably starting a year ago, is a system and a method. We sort of built it ourselves, where a robot now, we put the part on the end of like what I call a
Okay.
standoff, and a robot picks it up, finishes it, puts in the ultrasonic, blasts it with air, puts it back. We have like a 0% redo rate now. We don't have all that human involvement. The finish is better. It's more consistent. We don't have that hand sanding. And so, but the reason I mentioned that is that the machine does 4 parts at a time. Sorry, 4 sliders, so 8 parts, 8 bodies.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and then I can just put them on the robot. I can put one on the robot. I can put 8 on the robot. It's a racking system, and so it's quite fluid. So to answer your question, like typically I'll run the machine. It'll take uh 2 to 3 hours to do the first side of 8 parts, and then anywhere from 2 to 3 hours up to 12 hours to do the other 8 side, depending on the complexity. So these machines are running on like
all
um,
the time.
a lot, like a lot of hours. And then it's just take it from there. Once it comes off, put it on the robot, and the robot will take about 45 minutes for each part. So each slider probably gets 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 hours of work done to it from the block of metal to the finished thing that can then be assembled. Probably 4 or 5 hours per slider. But we have two machines, and we're just got it with a second robot, and the robot runs 24 hours a day. That doesn't stop, so that goes all through the night. Um, so it sounds like big numbers, but it's not really, because everything takes so long to make.
Yeah. So is it, if you're kind of doing the math and you're averaging that, as it almost sounds like roughly a slider a day, right? Because 5 hours, 6 hours is almost a day in a way, right? So are you making four sliders? Like, does it come down to like four sliders a week, or is that like four sliders every few days?
No, it's a lot more than that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of like for an 8 hour working day, you'd get like 1.5 to 2 sliders,
Right.
but we're running way longer. The robot's running 24 hours a day. We have two machines, so that kind of doubles your capacity. So you've got 48 hours a day, not 24 hours a day. So we're doing probably, it varies. Like, it depends if we've got a new slider coming out or one that's really interested, or some months are just better than others. And no, we're doing like a few dozen sliders a week. So it's not, for the size of us, it's not that much. And again, that kind of goes back to the beginning where I was, I don't know if it was when we started this or it was before you hit record, but it was a bit of a stressful week in that we're still not really making any money. Like, that's the thing. I'm not taking any money out of the business. It's like, if I get ahead a little bit, it's like I need to get another machine, because that's to try and get out of that awkward place where we need a bit more capacity, we need a bit more sales. So yeah, it's definitely not a money spinner yet, but we work towards that. I've got other things I'd like to work on. But yeah, the numbers aren't as probably as high as you'd think.
So is that why there seems to be more of a pre-order model that's happened now than just sort of drops? Is it easier to
Um,
manage pre-orders? I would think it's kind of easier to manage in the sense that you can forecast your sales, but then at the same time
yeah,
you've got the pressure, right, of committing. Like, I know, like even the
yes,
thing with the pens, like you were in a position where you felt like you needed to come out and say to people, "I'm sorry," and whereas if there wasn't a pre-order, that you wouldn't even need that, right? Like, it would just be like they're out when they're out.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
is it like uh, um, again, like the necessary evil for pre-orders? Is that something that, is that just the way it's going to
Um,
go now?
it's no, it's I vacillate between them quite often. I'm like, right, no more pre-orders, and then I'll be like, okay,
Pre-orders.
let's do, because it's good for me. The downside for me is obviously you have to then fulfill by this
Yes.
deadline, which I've been really bad at, and I still don't seem to learn, and that's definitely an issue that I'm working on. But it's bad for the customers because that happens as well. But it's good for me because I know exactly how many I need to make and how much material I need to order. And it's good for the customers because everyone gets one, as opposed to us selling out, um, and having to do another short run and people waiting again. And and the other side of business is, every email that comes in, and we get lots every day, it has to be answered. And
Right.
so there's a lot of time, so when we get 10 emails in a day saying, hey, when are these going to get restocked, that has to be, they've all got to be replied to, and suddenly you've lost half an, yeah, yeah, not for me, but say Tina, Tina or Fizzy, who does the customer support, they've got to spend a set amount of time. So it helps in that regard. And I think there's another, yeah, the other potential thing that helps is if I make a big run of them, we invest a lot of time, we make 100 of something, for instance, or 50 of something. they can sit around for months because I misjudged the popularity of
Right.
how popular I thought they would be. And so a pre-order is very good for that. If I need to do a short run, great. If I need to do a long run, great. I know it in advance. So I kind of vacillate between yes, pre-orders are great, and no, they're a living hell as well. It's I go between them.
Do you have designs that you have just realized are less popular than others, or are they all just kind of their own thing and they all go up and down?
No, you pretty much know immediately if they're going to be popular or not because the sales don't come in or the sales do come in. Or if you post a prototype on, say, Facebook, the comments are just, the comments go crazy.
Right.
Um, so you kind of know pretty much immediately, like let's say within half an hour or an hour. And then that's pretty much how it's going to be for the duration of his life. I mean, you talked about that wave slider that you have.
Yeah.
Um, like some most of the designs, well, this sounds selfish, but it seems to work, which is I design everything for me. Like I never really I've had once or twice where I've kind of listened to people and they wanted a certain thing, and so I'm design it and it's thinking about other people, and they usually fail quite spectacularly. And so
It's amazing
everything
when
is
person wants something and then they think everybody's going to love this. Like, this is a great idea. You
yeah
should do it. And everyone's like, oh, that's it.
yeah
And it happens to be that one person
yeah
just has a quirk or an eccentricity with what they want.
yeah
And then
yeah
onto
exactly
what you
yeah.
want. You're the designer, you make the product. And so that stands to reason then that it's they love the stuff you make, not what each other thinks up to tell you to make.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the wave was something that I wanted. The wave slider, for instance, just like every other slide, it's just something I have to usually have to get out of my system.
Yeah.
I wanted this thing that was, I can't remember the exact how I got around to it, but when I see it, I'm like, yep, that's it. And I sometimes you can kind of gauge it, and sometimes you can't, like how popular it will be. And I knew right away that that wasn't going to be as popular as, say, like the Toad X, which
Right. The
is
classic.
seems to be the most popular one right now. Yeah, yeah. And so those initial sales in the first half an hour or an hour, I'm like, yep, that's probably not going to be a big seller. But the weird thing is with it doesn't mean it's a bad slider. It just means those who do like it usually love it. That's what a
Niche.
design that's not popular means. It's like super
Yeah.
niche. It's not just a slider. It's like a particular design.
Well, it's speaking of a
Um,
slider, there was one of yours. So, I mean, if I had all the money in the world, I would buy everything that comes out because your your slider was somebody sold me. Poop Jones sold me a wing back in December. That was like my first like, I'm gonna spend this money and my wife's gonna kill me.
yeah,
And that was my entrance into the high end fidget thing. And I mean,
yeah,
I loved it. It was great. But I realized too, to try other things, you could, like you said, you can sell things, get things. And I thought, oh, well, this is how I'm going to move around this space.
yeah,
What's funny is I
yeah,
traded to get the wave and I was really, really happy to get another one of these sliders. The one slider that there's so many designs of yours that I'd love to have and I could feel it. The one slider that I missed out on, and it's not even I missed out on, again, it's just cash flow. But so
yeah.
I've had this tattooed on my arm ever since the day I went into business for myself, which is
Oh yeah, work. It's actually work to play.
work is play.
Work is play. Sorry,
Because
work
so
is play. Yeah,
I'm a designer, I'm a graphics guy, I'm all that stuff, and so I've had that on my arm for about 15 years, 20 years now. When you
yeah,
came out with the work play one, I was like, holy shit! And it was so hard to
yeah,
buy it because I was like, God, this thing's like
yeah.
right on my skin. But what brought that one out? Because that was such a left turn in a way from all the other stuff you've done. And did that become like a big thing, or was that just another niche that kind of came up and then went away?
Um, you know what? I don't know where it came from. Sometimes things just pop into my head. Like it's just like there's the spider slider where it has these sort of
Yeah.
things like that come up. That came from me sitting at traffic lights and looking at these. There's a pickup truck next to me with these cool wheels that came out, and I'm like, oh, I've got to do something like that. So I think
Uh,
that weekend, that's where that came from. It's very different. It doesn't look like it, but the concept was there. Um, so the workplay, I actually can't remember how it came about, but I think I always wanted to do some sort of name or words on a slider, like for a long, long time. But I never thought I'd be able to get the detail. But I think I learned so much about contouring and machining and getting good finishes and how to do it. I thought, oh, I think this is time. And I just thought it actually wasn't a very popular slider, believe it or not. Like I thought it would be way popular. I totally misjudged it, and so and it's actually quite challenging both to make and
And it
get the
was,
surface finish because yeah, it's a real pain. It takes a long time. I break end mills on it, so you have to start them again. I've probably thrown more out that were half done than I've actually sold because they were just so hard to make. So that's a factor as well. Like if it's hard to make and they're not selling, it's like why would I continue
right.
that? But for some people that is like like I really like that slider. It's something.
It's exciting to see um, new designs, and I can say that I think because of that, like I love watching your products. Um, I of the top three, I love them all for different reasons, and now I've owned them all. But the one thing I can say about yours is that there's constant innovation with
Mm,
almost radical changes on top, but consistent design on the bottom. So you always know what you're going to get in a way, which I love. I mean, it's
yeah,
awesome to say like it. You see people combining all the time because they can. The
yeah, yeah.
plates always fit and the bottoms fit, and so
Yes,
the fact that
yes.
that happens, but then you can innovate your design on the top. Um, that kind of leads me to talking for a minute about the AI design because that came out
Yeah,
and people, I felt like people didn't know how to respond to it, and
yeah,
I have opinions or thoughts as to why, um, but I'm curious to know from your end the AI design. I'm let's talk about it for a second. What brought that out? Was it just like, oh, I wonder if I could do this, or was it genuinely saying, I wonder if this could be a new product line moving forward?
well, my answer is really um, AI design is going to be it's going to be everything. Like ultimately, no one is going to be designing anything, and I know some people don't believe that, but it's just
Yeah.
so obvious to me that it's just like I start using like whatever it is, whether it's Chat GPT just to get answers. Like I found myself recently not even going to Google. It's like I don't want to search through results. I just want the answer. So I'll just go into ChatGPT and ask the thing I want. Like I wanted to figure out how to use the memory. My car seat someone was borrowing my car and it's got electric seats and they adjusted the seat. I'm like, I want to use it's got a memory thing. So rather than Googling and trying to find the manual on how this is like 15-year-old car, how to save the memory, I just went, how do I adjust the seats, the memory seats on my Lexus 1997 or how I don't know 2007 car, whatever it is, and it just gave me the answer. And I think it's going to be the same. It's early days yet, so I probably jumped the gun a little bit, but I think, or it just seems kind of obvious to me that everything is going to be AI designed. I mean, when you go on, I mean, you're super familiar with YouTube, and YouTube is essentially an AI that's curating. The videos that come up on the right hand side. It's that they're in your interest. It's
Sure.
evolving as your interests evolve. And I think designs, whether it's cars, sliders, anything really, will ultimately be. I think it'll be that it'll just know what you're like. It'll know what you like. It'll see, online privacy, whatever. Like everyone's sort of, yeah, everyone's information is kind of out there, and your preferences are all there. You tick yes to the
Oh,
terms and conditions,
I have like
and I
single
think
homes in our house, literally listening to every single conversation.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's not. But I mean, people always think it's always sinister and stuff. To me, it's not really. These companies just want to make money. That's it, and and that's fine. They have to provide some sort of service, but. yeah, AI just seems inevitable to me, and I was probably I've always been trying to do new things, and I get bored very quickly. Hence, new designs, new sliders. I rarely look back on a design I've done or a thing I've done or go and revisit it. I see other makers, they make variations, whether it's the knife market pens, they
Yeah.
make variations on what they do. But the titanium pen, for instance, that we did recently, like I didn't want to just do another pen. Like the mechanism is designed. It's like a new mechanism. You've got a bolt action, a click action. You've got a capped pen, and that's kind of it in the pen market. But I wanted to come up with something new, and it took a while. But I think it's kind of like that's sort of to answer your question of why I come up with new stuff. I just get bored. It's always been in me to do that, and but I think I to go back to what you originally said with the AI. Yeah, I just thought AI is here. Let's do it. Like it can create cool sliders, but an image of one, but we still have to get someone that's skilled and talented in 3D design to turn that into a 3D model,
Right.
and then I have to figure out how to machine that. Um, and also sort of you'd mentioned it was like a mixed response online. It was mixed. It was mostly negative, which is totally fair enough. And most people seem to be like, I don't like the AI design. I want your design, Magnus. Like I think they have that familiarity that people like to buy from people,
Yeah.
not from a something. But it still seems to me inevitable that this designs of everything in life will go towards AI. It's maybe just not now. It might be 5 years or 10 years. So
I
that's
wonder,
kind of my long-winded answer.
that would have been kind of an interesting experiment though, to see if, because it's exactly to your point, right? Like this, I find a lot of this community, except when you get like the bigger manufacturers, like the Loudies and the Mackies and all that stuff, which feel like they're more being built by faceless, nameless people.
Yeah.
The loyal brand followers tend to follow the maker. So I
Yes,
can see where
absolutely.
some of
Yeah.
them feel betrayed almost, right? As and that
Yeah.
not that they there's a right to feel betrayed because you can do whatever you want, but just that initial reaction, that emotional reaction of,
Yeah.
but I want Magnus designing my things. I don't want
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
And I wonder, if in that time, if you had released it first and said, "Hey, here's a new design I've done," and then people go, "Oh yeah, that's cool," and then you come out and go, "Actually, it was AI." Like AI came up with design, and then what
Yeah.
would have been the
Yeah.
response? Now, of course, that's kind of a tricky thing to do, but I do
Yeah.
find a lot of times people's emotions tend to regulate their taste. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it could be, and I'm sure when you built it, it still comes from you because you looked at it and went, "Yeah, I like this. I think this is a good thing. I think this would work." So
Yeah.
it's interesting though that the response in a lot of cases was, "Ew, like that's AI. Like I don't want that. I want a Magnus."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I was kind of sad to see it kind of pop up and go away because I thought, "Oh, that's really neat." That like it's like a tamed AI design, but it really, I mean, it's just the
Yes.
idea
Yeah.
generation, right? Like it's not even it didn't make the slider. I'm sure it came up with a whole bunch of different options, and then you refined it. I
Yeah.
kind of like this, and then I'm going to kind of create it. I mean, it reminds me of your when you had said fail fast, right? Like,
Yeah.
it, and was that a case of fail fast? Like, did you just keep coming up with ideas and throwing them away until you had something good, or was this just AI designed it, you tweaked it a bit, and then you guys built it, and it worked on the first build?
Well, yeah. So there's the two things there. One is that you said it was sad to see it pop up and go away. I think it's going to come back. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, like not just now for us, but like I said, AI will be everything everywhere. So it was maybe like a preview, I think. Um, and the other thing is yeah, it's interesting because it's not just like, oh, AI designed it. I said like give me a slider, click. There was a lot of work. Like there was a couple of hundred sliders that I went through at least.
Wow.
And the two I made, they were the ones that appealed to me. And I'm like, I love that. So it's almost like instead of the skill is me designing, the skill is then curating.
Right.
Curating because with all the sort of AI and all the compute power and whatnot, like it can just generate endless. Like we actually, we actually had a really good success. I say we because my son Julian, he's really into the AI thing as well, and he started um, using. In fact, he actually we created a we started doing AI design knives as well, like full knives. It was a
Okay.
bit tricky initially, but we figured out how to do it with by using images and blending images. And we ended up, my son ended up, he's never really done any programming or anything. I did many years ago, software programming. Um, he ended up writing Python scripts and he couldn't figure out how to do it. So he actually had the Chat GPT AI generate Python code by asking it what to do, that could then use Midjourney, which is the AI software we use to generate images and designs. And so you had AI design the software that could then
Right.
be run on this AI, and we had it generating automatically. Every 30 seconds, we got 4 new designs just for fun. So we got 4,000 knife designs overnight by the morning. And so, but maybe only 20 of them were of any good. Like if you're actually going to go, hey, I'm going to make this knife,
Yeah.
because some of the knives were just mind-blowingly good. And I'm just like, I was just like throwing my hands in the air. I'm like, because I've designed quite a few knives, I've just not quite made it to production yet. Um, and you just sort of throw your hands in the air and be like, why am I even designing like this? If I look at that knife, it's just unreal. It's so good.
And you can fight it or you can embrace it. And I think the people that fight it are the same people that had, hard time with cell phones when they first came out, or
Yeah,
streaming
yeah,
TV or all this stuff. So yeah, I think it's if someone's got to be the pioneer, right? Someone's got to like
yeah,
take this thing on and say, okay, this is the way forward. And I think people might be
yeah,
afraid of that, but at the same time, they also need to remember that, again, like you said, it's still your product. Like this is not AI taking over and you sitting on the couch kind of going, that one's good. Like, you're still working on them and
yeah,
it's still you. It's still your slider. So we're coming up. I mean, I've had you here for like an hour now, so I'm gonna let you go soon. One question, and I
yeah,
just know because people are wondering: are beans and spinners ever coming back? I know spinners are something that's like a long, long, long time ago, but the beans, I
yeah,
know that was more recent, and that seems to be
yeah,
hugely popular. Whenever something comes up for sale, it's gone right away. Like people selling it secondhand.
yeah. They will be for sale again. It's one of the main things is just uh, and people, obviously people want fidgets and things, and
Yeah.
most people don't really care about the behind the scenes of the business, and so I don't say it. But the biggest factor there is cash flow. To get the material in for them and to take time, which will take a month to do a run of them, 3 to 4 weeks to do a run of them on the lathe, which is a full-time machinist. Like it's quite a lot of investment in terms of that. So it's really more of a, it's not I just don't want to make them. It's like, no, I have to take a run of it. There's a bit of strategy to get the material in to to get them made. So that's generally when I'm not making anything, it's usually because of that. It's a cash flow. There's other things going
Right.
on we're making. We have to take a run at it. But the beans will be made again. Spinners, we did start designing some. It's like a year ago now. I don't know. That is the answer. I don't know if we will make spinners again. I know they're quite popular. There's definitely a demographic who are just,
Yeah, like it
they
never
just
seemed to.
will keep buying
It never
spinners.
went away.
Yeah,
It just got
yeah, yeah.
smaller and more
So
niche, but it's
yeah,
very loyal fan base for spinners.
yeah, yeah.
So
So I don't know. Possibly it's 50-50 at
yeah.
this stage for spinners.
So this has been fantastic, Magnus. Thanks so much for like seriously just taking the time, especially it's like 7:30 in the morning. I'm sure you had other things you wanted to do to start your day, but I'm honored that you decided to start. And last minute too, you were just like, "Well, okay, you want to do it now?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, it's okay, quick."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everything into play. So that's fantastic. So honestly, considering how busy you are, and how successful your products are in the community and stuff, I'm still kind of humbled that you had the time to even do this or to even bother.
Oh, I
Go on.
appreciate it. No, thank you, Sean. It's great. You're excellent at interviewing. I didn't really have to do too much grunt work there. I
Oh,
just
that's great.
I just answered your question. So no, I really appreciate it. It's actually been really fun. I don't think I've actually ever done any sort of interview type thing before. I think you're the first ever. So there you
Oh
go.
wow, so it's an exclusive. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, put that in the title.
I will. All right. So thanks so much, bud.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Okay.
Cheers.